Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Idanim Dhammapadiste Sacham Nivatayajataha Tam Jijikshatyadamoyam Amritanai Dita Kalahi. Translation Prabhu Sangha C.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. You are now standing on one leg only, which is your truthfulness, and you are somehow or other hobbling along, but quarrel personified, Kali, flourishing by deceit, is also trying to destroy that leg. Please repeat. You are now standing on one leg only, which is your truthfulness, and you are somehow or other hobbling along. But quarrel personified, Kali, flourishing by deceit, is also trying to destroy that leg. Purport. The principle of religion do not stand on some dogmas or man-made formulas, but they stand on four primary regulative observances, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. The mass of people must be taught to practice these principles from childhood. Austerity means to accept voluntarily things which may not be very comfortable for the body, but are conducive for spiritual realization. For example, fasting. Fasting twice or 4 times a month is a sort of austerity which may be voluntarily accepted for spiritual realization only, and not for any other purposes, political or otherwise. Fastings which are meant not for realization but for some other purposes are condemned in the Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, cleanliness is necessary both for mind and for the body. Simple bodily cleanliness may help to some extent, but cleanliness of the mind is necessary, and it is effected by glorifying the Supreme Lord. No one can cleanse the accumulated mental dust without glorifying the Supreme Lord. A godless civilization cannot cleanse the mind because it has no idea of God. For this simple reason, people under such a civilization cannot have good qualifications, however they may be materially equipped. We have to see things by their resultant action. The resultant action of human civilization in the age of Kali is dissatisfaction. So everyone is anxious to get peace of mind. This peace of mind was complete in such an age because of the existence of the above-mentioned attributes of the human beings. Gradually, these attributes have diminished in the Treta Yuga to 3/4, in the Dwapara to half, and in this age of Kali to 1/4, which is also gradually diminishing on account of prevailing untruthfulness. By pride, either artificial or real, the resultant action of austerity is spoiled. By too much affection for female association, cleanliness is spoiled. By too much addiction to intoxication, mercy is spoiled. And by too much lying propaganda, truthfulness is spoiled. The revival of Bhagavad Dharma can save human civilization from falling prey to evils of all description. I'm going to So Bani Swami has gone down to Sydney for a week or so they're big shoes to fill, but we'll do our best. So, as we know, Marge Prikshit, touring the kingdom, came across a Sudra dressed as a king, and he was hitting Dharma the bull and Bhumi the cow. In other words, it's the cow was the personified Bhumi, the goddess of earth, and Dharma, the bull, was actually Yamaraj in that form of the bull. And so Maharaj Parikshit was questioning, why is this going on? So Bhumi and Dharma, they presented different reasons, but basically Maharaj Parikshit well understood that basically it's the influence of the age of Kali, which is very quickly progressing after the departure of Krishna. We have that famous verse in Bhagavatam that at the end of Kali Yuga, that Krishna has departed along with religious principles, etc. But in his place, the Srimad Bhagavatam has arisen. And this will basically be the the savior of human beings within in this Kali Yuga. So whilst the personality Krishna disappeared, he incarnated as a literary incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam. But the material energy basically has two potencies. One is a covering over potency, and the other is pulling down potency. So we see that this personality of Kali, who is the personified Kali Yuga, is here trying to cover over and destroy all religious principles. And we see today that he's very, very successful. That basically he's getting fat and lazy because everybody is completely under his sway, completely in Maya and covered over with all sorts of illusion. But Prabhupada says to avoid this, basically we have the four regulative principles, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with: intoxication, illicit sex, gambling, and lack of truthfulness. So these four principles are basically, and Jiva Goswami mentions them in the Sandarbhas and the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, but whilst in the previous ages, such as Satyuga, they were just standard traits of human behaviour. As the ages pass in the Kali Yuga, it's practically unheard of for people to voluntarily follow these principles. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he like, perhaps you could say, institutionalized them within the Gaudiya Mat, that these were mandatory for those who accepted initiation from him. Before then, there wasn't really the Varnashram system so well established, and rather than sannyas, there was just Babaji. And but the Babajis, they had a very bad reputation. If anybody has read much of what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has written, he was very critical of these Babajis. And so while they were technically Vaishnavas, because of their bad behaviour, they were bringing a very bad reputation upon Vaishnavism. And it's only through particularly the efforts of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that they were able to revive the reputation of Vaishnavism through speaking and through prolific book production and preaching. But he would say that following these four regulative principles is mandatory just to come to the human form of life. And of course he introduced the chanting of 64 rounds, which was, for Prabhupada, he reduced to 16, but nevertheless this chanting of Hare Krishna and following the regulative principles are considered mandatory if one wants to be considered on the human form of life. Of course, these are four regulative principles in and of themselves won't make one Krishna conscious, because they're not spiritual activities in themselves, but they bring one to the sattvic platform, to the platform of mode of goodness, which puts one in good stead as a springboard to the spiritual platform. For one who is not following these principles, very difficult to progress in spiritual life. And so Prabhupada, he starts off with the purport by saying, principal religion do not stand on some dogmas or man-made formulas, but they stand on the 4 primary regulative observances. So these observances given to us in Sastra, we have another verse which spoken by Yamaraj to the Yamadutas. We know the story with Ajamil. He was just very sinful, about to leave his body, and the Yamadutas were there already, had a special program for him, just waiting. But at the last moment, he called out to his son Narayan, and by chanting the name Narayan, he was free from all his sins. And at that time, the Vishnudutas come to take Ajamil. So there was a heated discussion between the Vishnudutas and Yamadutas, but ultimately Yamadutas were not successful in claiming the soul of Ajamil. So in a confused state, they went back to Yamaraj to say, what's going on? We thought you were the boss, and somehow or other we had these effulgent beings who took this sinful soul from us. So what's going on? So this verse was spoken by Lord Yamaraj, that Dhammam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam na vai vidu risya na pidevaha na siddhi mukhya asura manasyaha kuto no vijidala charana dayaha. So he was saying that real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although fully situated in the mode of goodness, even the great rishis who occupy the topmost planets cannot ascertain the real religious principles, nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddhaloka, to say nothing of the asuras, ordinary human beings, Vijayadas and Charanas. So it's only those who are had the special mercy of Guru, Sadhu and Sastra, following these, purified by following regular principles, we can begin to understand what those real religious principles are. Prabhupada mentions in the purport that when challenged by the Vishnudutas to describe the principles of religion, the Yamadutas said, Veda pranihito dhammaha, that they thought that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that, not being transcendental, are only meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. Real religious principles, however, are nishtraigunya, above the 3 modes of material nature, or transcendental. Herein it is stated that the real religious principle is that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That principle is stated in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Savadam Prichaja Mam Ekam Saranam Vaja. One should give up all other duties and surrender unto the lotus feet of Krishna. That is the real religious principle everyone should follow. Even though one follows Vedic scripture, one may not know this transcendental principle, for it is not known to everyone. So this was the situation of the Yamadutas. They were just performing their duty, but then they become bewildered and confused because they were confronted by the Vishnudutas. So Yamaraj cleared up this misunderstanding, and basically he said, anybody who is is a Krishna Bhakta, you leave alone, you don't touch. So this is the one of the points Prabhupada is presenting, that we can't invent a religion, we can't invent religious principles. There's that classic example, L. Ron Hubbard, who was the founder of Scientology. He was famous for, or perhaps we can say infamous for, saying if you want to get rich, start a religion. And he was actually very successful doing that. But the point is, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Religious principles are enacted by Supreme Personality, not by humans. We can't invent a religion or religious practice. It's already there in the Vedas. We simply have to accept and follow. So Prabhupada mentions these different, these four regulative principles. He gives a slightly different version. He says that by pride destroys austerity. Normally we say that attachment intoxication destroys that austerity. But obviously there's different ways to present this. He also says that association of the opposite sex destroys cleanliness. And also addiction destroys mercy. Sometimes you say, as we said, intoxication destroys austerity. And he says lying destroys truthfulness. And we say gambling destroys truthfulness. So this is the different vows we make at the time of initiation. Of course, meat eating will destroy compassion or mercy. So it's a very unique situation we have in the Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, that these things are vowed at the time of initiation, taken very seriously. Of course, sometimes you hear people challenging these things, that there's no need to do this, and it's not necessary, etc. But an honest person will understand, okay, this is the standard, and at the moment I can't follow. That's the honest platform, rather than thinking, let's change the philosophy. I don't like what I'm hearing, let's change the philosophy. Let's make it 3 religious principles or 2 religious principles, like that. So, but if we accept the spiritual master and make these vows, if we have difficulty following, we don't change the philosophy. We just understand at this point I'm struggling, and praying for the mercy of Guru and Krishna to bring me up to that platform. Because these 4 activities, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, meat eating, these are the pillars of materialistic life in this Kali Yuga. If you take these away from many people, they think, well, what else is there to do? My whole life is made up of this sort of thing. But it's only through practice and purification, gradually we're able to come up to this platform. And by the mercy of Guru, Sadhu and Krishna, very quickly, that one who has sincerity is able to become purified from all anarthas, unwanted things within the heart, and come onto this platform. But one shouldn't be so caught up in frustration, remorseful as there's problems falling down, different things, because the whole atmosphere is surcharged with these sort of activities. Everywhere we see magazines, books, social media, advertising, etc. It's all encouraging us to do one or more of these activities. So therefore, discriminating in what we allow our senses to come in contact with, and keeping good association, we can more or less stay protected from these things. But once again, we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves if there's some issue, because in the Kali Yuga, these 4 activities are natural tendencies in our conditioned state. But nevertheless, by having a strong sadhana, keeping good association, slowly we can come to this human stage of life where we're able to stay focused on our spiritual life, and automatically all these other things through the purification of the heart will fall into place. So Prabhupada mentions that he gives the example of fasting as one austerity. So austerity is defined by voluntarily accepting hardships. So there was one class I heard by one of our Maharajas said, sometimes we can put a list together what sort of austerity we're going to follow. Perhaps it's for during Kartik or on a Kodasi day or whatever, but sort of tongue-in-cheek he said, if it's on your list, it's not really an austerity. You know, it's sort of, you know, we have to, if we want to actually practice austerity, there has to be a little bit, have to challenge ourselves a little bit, even if it's just for short term. On the other hand, we shouldn't be so artificially renounced out of pride or false ego, whatever reason, that we try to make things so austere and we fall down from that position. It just creates a disturbance in society, and even it can be the cause that one falls away from spiritual life altogether out of, you know, being ashamed that I advertised myself I was going to do all these sort of things I wasn't able to follow. How can I face people? I mean, it does happen. So we need to be honest with ourselves, and life is hard enough as it is also, that we don't have to artificially induce different austerities, but we can just follow just by following the standard spiritual program which Prabhupada is giving us is austerity enough. By putting aside 2 hours a day for chanting the holy name, just getting up in the morning, particularly in winter, that's austerity. One can take an extra step of taking a cold bath, but just getting up early in the cold morning and basically just following the standard program, there's austerity enough. We don't, perhaps for short term we could introduce something else, or if one is truly naturally renounced, they may be able to accept other austerities, but it's not a competition that we're trying to compete with each other who can be so austere. It's also said that one should never advertise the austerities that they're performing. It's said that if one does that, you'll lose the result of it, because basically if you're advertising to others, it's born out of pride. There was one devotee a few hundred years ago in Vrindavan. He's a very famous, he was born a Muslim, but he became a great devotee by the name of Raj Khan. And in one of his writings, he said, you should practice your sadhana like a village girl carries water. So it sounds a little bit cryptic, but what it basically means is that, you know, the village girls, they come to the well and they have all their water pots on their head, you know, so they fill up the water, sometimes 2, even 3 high, and so it's actually quite heavy, and they get the right balance, and then they walk back to their house, and they may be walking with their friends and they're talking about, you know, different things are going on, but they never once forget about their water pot. Otherwise, if they forget about that, then it falls off and all their labour is lost. So he says that one should practice a sadhana, that you don't advertise it, but it's always there. You're always thinking about Krishna, always thinking about, you know, progressing in spiritual life, but you're also getting on with your life. But so it's an interesting point that he brings up, that we don't advertise it, but it's always there. We're thinking about Krishna in our service. So he also mentions that one shouldn't fast for material reasons, like he specifically mentioned politics, and he was quite critical about Mahatma Gandhi, that with his program of non-violence in trying to defeat the British, trying to get the British out of India, and he would fast for these political reasons. That, you know, if there was rioting going on, he would begin to fast, and when he was feeling very weak and sick and the general populace heard about it, then the rioting would stop. But Prabhupada condemns this sort of idea that fasting for for material reasons is condemned. Fasting is meant, or any austerity is meant for pleasing Krishna, for spiritual reasons. And of course, gambling destroys truthfulness. Sometimes also mental speculation is a type of gambling. And so we hear that in Kali Yuga there's only one leg left, which is truthfulness, but even that one Kali is trying to destroy. But one example you could use of truthfulness, particularly in the country, you see these honesty boxes. I know when I was growing up as a kid, I used to see a lot more. I grew up in the country. Everywhere, every sort of farm had an honesty box, and their produce they'd put in a little box in the front of their property and have a money box. And so you put your money in and take it. Even newspapers, the Sunday newspapers back when there wasn't 7-day trading, and there'd be a little box in front of the shop with the newspapers, and in the 60s, I remember in South Australia, Sunday Mail paper was 2 cents it cost. You put your 2 cents in and you take a paper. So it was based on honesty. But now you hear stories that, somebody comes along, they take everything from the stall plus the money box itself. So this is, truthfulness. Nobody is honest. So even this form of truthfulness is disappearing. And of course, meat eating destroys all compassion. When you're maintaining yourself by exploiting the bodies of others. In other words, you're quite happy to maintain yourself by having other animals being killed and for you to consume. So all compassion and mercy disappears from one's heart. By associating with opposite sex, destroys all cleanliness. And Arjuna asks in the Bhagavad Gita, he asks Krishna, says, what is that we're sort of seen to act in an improper way, almost by force? And Krishna replies that it is lust only, Arjuna. They're all devouring enemy of man. So of course lust is not necessarily just to do with sex life, but it's trying to acquire as much as possible or enjoy as much as possible in the material world. But generally when we talk about lust, it generally refers to desire to enjoy the opposite sex. So it's said that this is because it's considered the highest pleasure in the material world, it therefore becomes a stronger shackle that holds us to this material world, birth after birth. If we have some sort of a desire here, a desire there for some things, you could sort of imagine they're shackles, but they're not so strong. Where through some purification and through a service, through good sadhana, we can break away those shackles, but particularly for to desire to enjoy the opposite sex. This is considered the strongest shackle, which keeps us entrapped in this material world. So once again, by strong sadhana, through proper discrimination of associating with others, slowly we can overcome this. And sometimes it can be that there's a particular desire that we struggle with our whole life. But Krishna, he's within the heart of Super Soul, and he's witnessing, he's recognizing that struggle, that even if again and again we're falling down one way or another, Krishna recognized the struggle that we're going through. Sort of like use the example, if 2 men come into the temple, one is a rich man and one is a poor man, and they both give, $10 donation into the donation box. So for the rich man, it's just pocket money, it's nothing. But for the poor man, he may have been saving for a long time, to give that $10. So which is going to please Krishna more? Obviously, it's for the poor man. He struggled. It's a struggle to give that amount. So in the same way, if we're dealing with some sort of material desire, and it's really giving us problems, but again and again we're just fighting against it by trying to maintain our sadhana, etc. Krishna is appreciating that struggle. He says, this soul is doing that for me. How much he must love me. That's how Krishna is seeing that. So in Kali Yuga, so many issues, so many problems, but somehow or other, by keeping good association, strong sadhana, and hearing from Bhagavatam every day, different sastras every day, we can remain strong on the path. So one of the symptoms, well, there's one story from the Mahabharata which explains some of the symptoms that come up in Kali Yuga. Of course, by reading in the 12th canto descriptions of Kali Yuga, we can see some of these things. I mean, it's sort of presented that they're coming up at the end of Kali Yuga, but many of the things there are, we can see now, different countries, and, different political parties, etc., are coming up. But there's one story from Mahabharata which gives us some idea that Bhima was standing outside Yudhisthira's palace, and all of a sudden one man come running to him from the forest, and he said, "Oh my lord, I saw something amazing. I don't know what it means." He said in the forest there was a big garden surrounded by a fence, but that fence began to eat the garden. "Oh my lord, what does that mean?" And Bhima said, "Well, that is quite strange. You go and see my brother Yudhisthira, he will explain." And then soon after that, another man come running in, says, "Oh my lord, I saw something amazing in the forest. I don't know what it means. There was one big water pot, and water from that water pot was going into 5 small water pots. And all those 5 water pots was filled up. And then the water went from those 5 water pots back into the big pot, but that big pot was only half full. What does that mean?" And Bhima said, "Well, I don't know, but you go and see my brother Yudhisthira. He'll explain that. He's very intelligent." And then one third man come running out of the forest. He says, "Oh my lord, I've seen something amazing. I saw an elephant going through an eye of a needle, but its tail got stuck. What does that mean?" And Bhima said, "Oh, I don't know. You see my brother Yudhisthira, he can explain." And then the 4th man came running out. Says, "Oh my lord, I saw a big boulder rolling down a hill and it's crashing big trees. And then it come to a small tree, and the boulder was stopped by that tree. That little tree. It was breaking down the big ones, but one little tree stopped that boulder. What does that mean?" And Bhima said, "You go and see my brother Yudhisthira." So Bhima was intrigued, all these 4 things going on in the forest. So he went to see Yudhisthira, to hear the explanation. So Yudhisthira said, "Yes, these are some of the symptoms of the age of Kali." So this garden that was surrounded by the fence, but the fence was eating the garden. So normally the fence is meant to protect the garden. But what this represents, that in the age of Kali, that the leaders of society, they won't protect the population. They'll simply be exploiting the population for everything they can get. There'll be so much greed and corruption. Nobody will be safe from their efforts to take everybody else's wealth. So this is one of the symptoms we're going to see in Kali Yuga. So with the water pots, that one big water pot, all the water going to the 5 smaller pots and then coming back. But when all the water came back, that pot was only half full. So what this means is that one man, a father, he may have 5 sons and he can very nicely maintain them. But in the influence of Kali Yuga, as the father gets older, those 5 sons, they neglect the father. One man can maintain 5 sons, but in Kali Yuga, those 5 sons, they're very neglectful of their elderly father. And you can imagine an elephant going through an eye of a needle, but the tail gets stuck. How is that happening? What does that mean? And Yudhisthira, he said, yes, so you get these greedy businessmen and influential people in society, politicians, etc. They're corrupt and greedy, and they engage in so much sort of black market and illegal activities. But even if they get caught, because of their influence and their wealth, they are able to escape any charges. But so that represents the elephant going in, but the tail getting stuck. The ordinary person in society, they do one little misdemeanor, and then they're brought before the court, fined and put into jail because they don't have that influence and wealth. So this is another symptom of Kali Yuga, that the rich, wealthy people become corrupt and greedy, and they're able to buy their way out of problems. Whereas the ordinary person, they just get caught up in the legal system. And this last example, that the big boulder coming down the hill, crashing the trees, and then it gets stuck on one little tree, says this is one good symptom of Kali Yuga. That boulder represents the onslaught of Kali Yuga, smashing through everything, any religious principles, austerities, whatever, it's just smashing through it. But if you have one pure devotee on this planet, he's able to reverse and annihilate that influence of the age of Kali. So when that boulder hits that small tree, that's representing one pure devotee. So we see in our line, so many great devotees have come to take the battle to Kali. So we have our Srila Prabhupada, who is spreading Sanatana Dharma all over the world, the message of the Bhagavatam. And he said it's like a war. We're battling Kali, and sometimes there'll be casualties, but ultimately we'll be victorious because we have Krishna on our side. Like in the Battle of Kurukshetra, the Kauravas had so many armies, so many Akshahini divisions, almost double what the Pandavas had, and even they had Krishna's own army, but because the Pandavas had Krishna on their side, they were victorious. So we have to see the whole situation from a spiritual platform, not material platform. Because if we see from a material platform, we can see that Kali is the influence of Kali is everywhere, and everybody is becoming caught up in these illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, meat eating, greed, corruption, etc., etc. But because we have Krishna, we're surrendering to Krishna. If we remain under Krishna's umbrella, we can say Lord Chaitanya, the umbrella of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, then we're going to get some protection. And if we remain under that shelter, then life, we're not unduly subjected to the ravages of Kali Yuga. And we even become strong enough that we can go out and, try to give this message to others. So this is some of the points we can understand that that Maharaj Prix is saying, you are now standing on one leg only, which is your truthfulness, and somehow or other hobbling along. But quarrel personified Kali, flourishing by deceit, is also trying to destroy that leg. So, as we said, we stay under the shelter of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, then we're going to be protected from this influence of Kali. Thank you very much. We'll end there. If there's any questions or comments.
I wondered about these rishis and sages.
Do we have a...
Cursing each other, sometimes cursing. Doesn't seem to be a trait of Vaishnava who should be prideless and showing humility. So, where do they stand in the scheme of things in the understanding of Krishna consciousness? And with many stories of the cursing, cursing, and even in the Mahabharata, as you know. So where does that fit into Vaishnava behaviour and Krishna consciousness?
Well, you have to see these rishis aren't necessarily Vaishnavas. They may be elevated brahmanas, they may be many things, but not necessarily brahmanas. You know, it's like the sages of Naimisharanya. You know, in the you have the four types of persons who approach Krishna out of to relief from stress, obtaining wealth, curiosity, and to surrender to the absolute truth. So it's said that these sages in Naimisharanya, it's more out of curiosity. You know, they're not necessarily all Vaishnavas. I asked Bhanu Swami specific about that, and he said, you know, a lot of them may have been personalists, you know, not necessarily Vaishnavas. So when we see activities going on which is not in accord with Vaishnava behaviour, because they're rishis, because they may be highly elevated, it doesn't necessarily automatically we can assume that they're Vaishnavas. So therefore, some of the activities, you know, they can be influenced by the modes.
You did mention though the former ages that these principles of austerity, cleanliness, and so forth were existing.
Yeah.
And they've been decreasing, and since the rishis obviously they were in the ages of the order, how is it they didn't sort of show more control of demeanour?
Yeah, well, this is the quality of the mode of goodness, but still, once again, if you're not actually a Vaishnava, you know, there may be some deficit in your behaviour.
The name Rishi or something suggests that they are perhaps personals, but they're in the sense of control, they're into Rishi, they're into transcendental activities. Yeah.
So we see, you know, some of the demigods, you know, Indra and Shiva, they get themselves into trouble as well. You know, the modes of material nature are there. I mean, sometimes you could say it's some sort of leela going on, but at the same time, you know, even the devas, they get, you know, we hear from the topmost planet to the lowest, where, you know, repeated birth and death taking place. You know, the modes of material nature are everywhere. And even on the platform of bhava, even for a Vaishnava on the platform of bhava, one can still fall down due to some, you know, bad behaviour, offence, whatever, aparad. So, you know, it's, I guess you have to see the bigger picture, that not everybody, regardless of their title or position, are not necessarily 100% pure Vaishnavas, and there may be some discrepancy in their character. That's my response anyway. Yeah. Yes, Cammy. One more click. Is it clicked right up? Is it?
No, it doesn't work.
Oh, it's not working. I'll just repeat your question.
I think in the past you mentioned that if we advertise any austerities with the form, it destroys any spiritual benefit we get from it. Would this apply for when we're talking to devotees and showing devotees about our understanding of how to go?
No. I mean, it depends on attitude. When you're...
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. Kali, you got memory. So the question is, like I mentioned in class, that if you advertise austerities, you can lose the benefit from that. Does that apply to just discussing with devotees about one's sadhana, etc.? No, it's more of a frame of mind that if you're advertising yourself, generally it's out of pride, that you want people to know this is what I'm doing. And therefore, it's not necessarily you lose all the benefit, but the benefit's kind of diminished out of that prideful mentality, you know. But if you're just discussing with other devotees in a, you know, a sort of good consciousness and sharing and try to encourage, that doesn't apply. That, you know, I'm doing extra rounds because of this. It's not coming out of pride. But generally, if somebody is advertising themselves, hey, did you have a cold shower? I had a cold shower this morning. Did you have a cold shower? You know, it's sort of that mentality that, you know, in the guise of asking questions, you're advertising what you're doing. It's coming out of a prideful mentality. Yeah, so that's the point to understand. But just general conversation about, you know, how you're doing, how the others are doing, you know, encouraging each other. That's not out of mentality of pride. That's just, you know, one of the pretty lakshanas, exchange of love, of revealing your mind and hearing others reveal their mind to you. Okay? Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.